Please welcome Simone Wicca, Director of the Blanton Museum of Art, and Kat Gordon, Founder and CEO of the 3% Movement.
Hey everybody, welcome back. I hope you all learned something from Mark Brackett's Permission to Feel, which is the perfect segue into this next discussion, which is when the blue and red emotions are high. It's so easy to be a leader when things are good, and true leadership is tested when things are challenging. And I have so much respect for our next guest, Simone Wicca. I want to tell you a couple things about her. And Simone is the director of the Blanton Museum. It was founded in 1963. It's part of the University of Texas at Austin, and it has a permanent collection of about 19,000 objects and welcomes more than 200,000 visitors annually, including many K-12 students and university students and faculty. So you can imagine how COVID would hit a leader who facilitates so much in real life gatherings. And so, Simone, I just want to quick give a background on you, and then I want to dive right into kind of how you've managed this uncertain kind of half year that we're coming out of. So Simone studied mathematics, which I think is fascinating, given the job you're doing now, at UT, and went to New York City with the intention of working on Wall Street before deciding to switch into arts and the administrative side of arts. So Simone, welcome to the 3% Conference.
Thank you, Kat. I'm thrilled to be here and really honored. Appreciate it.
Oh, awesome. Well, you know, everyone that's tuning in here, no matter from what corner of the world, has had COVID impact their lives. And I would love for you to take us back to kind of early March. When did it first hit your radar that this was something that was probably going to have an enduring impact? And what were your initial thoughts?
So I think early March, late February, I was becoming aware of it. But on that March 13th day, when there was a shutdown for the University of Texas and the city of Austin, it really, the night before, I remember thinking, this feels enormous, what's happening. It felt I was concerned about what this might mean financially for our country. It really quickly kind of dawned on me from that perspective, but also just kind of something we'd never gone through in terms of health of people and how this might impact all of our welfare. I had the benefit, my fiance who was living with me happened to be working on an article and was interviewing some major researchers and actually speaking to Susan Rice about this, people who had dealt with pandemics before. So I was hearing a lot of information. And it was very clear to me that what we understood our museum, how we were going to function, was about to just change, and that it wasn't clear how long it was going to last. And so very quickly, I realized the kind of severity of this.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I really admired about how you met that moment was you're a decisive leader, but this was a moment where it did not call for false certainty, and there were so many shifting realities. And so I'd love for you to talk about, how did you keep your team of people engaged without overpromising at a moment where you knew these shifting realities could impact things on a day-to-day basis? At 3%, we teach that as a 21st century leadership skill is comfort with ambiguity, which is actually something a lot of people can't model. And I feel like the way you handled this was almost a masterclass in that. So can you tell us about how you led through this time of ambiguity without overpromising to your team?
Well, thank you for saying that. I'm not, hopefully, I don't know masterclass, but I feel like we did a good job. My team did a great job. I think for me, ambiguity is incredibly important in leadership, because that is, you're not leading if it's all clear, there's no reason for leadership, right? You're following, in a sense, like the path is set for you. And And leadership is something that we all need, and it is about ambiguity in my perspective. And this was enormous, again, what was happening. And I think for me, it was just kind of trying to dissect very quickly, like that weekend, actually, after that Friday, March 13th, I brought my kind of leadership team together and started saying, okay, the first thing we need to do is, look at our budgets and come up with a budget that means we're going to be shut down for 2 months, one for 3 months, one for 6 months, one for 12 months. Like, what does this look like financially? And then also, what is our team going to be doing? Because if they're out for 2 weeks, is this, a week? Is this 3 months? Like, what does this look like? And started coming up with basically immediately, like those following weeks, bringing my leadership team together, which is really an extraordinary group of people, and the whole staff of the museum is extraordinary, and thinking through what we could get done as a museum, what were essential things we need to get done, kind of breaking a couple things up, like how do we stay connected to our members and our donors that we depend on? How do we stay connected and not lose our connection to community? We were heading into summer, so we had a little more time to think about teaching in the K through 12 and university world, because it was a little bit chaotic for everybody late spring. So I felt like we had a little time to figure that out. And the second part was, how do we have purpose? Most of our team is very much about serving audience members in person, visitors in person. So what do we all now do together? And I was really aware that anxiety is a very unhealthy place to be. And I think that level of balancing ambiguity and anxiety, I mean, if you don't have a little anxiety, you probably don't have a little ambiguity, but if you're not comfortable with it and not knowing at all what we're doing and for how long, I knew would be really taxing on the team. It was taxing on me. So I tried to create as many scenarios and come up with as many plans as we could to repurpose or reassign staff members, but also knowing that part of what was going to be needed was to communicate how confusing all of this was, and that when I made a decision, it may not exactly be clear. For example, I said, we're not doing tours until January. Of the museum. I just felt like that was going to be an impossibility from what I was listening to the mayor give nightly talks about what was happening in Austin. Not everybody agreed with it, but it was some point of clarity. And so as much clarity as I could give, but explain to them how the decisions weren't even clear to me, and I might need to change my mind along the way. So really coming up with as many plans and communicating as much as possible to relieve as much as anxiety and have people move in the same direction, hopefully.
Yeah. Hearing you talk about your process, it's very much echoing what, 3% is in the live event business. You are in the live tour business. And there were very similar kind of contingency planning with our advisory board, if this, then that. And I remember the moment I said to our event team who had done different, yes, we'll deliver our in real life event in Atlanta. We'll do a hybrid. We'll do an all virtual. And I remember saying to the event team, please do not feel that I will be disappointed if your recommendation is to do an all virtual event, because just as you said, it gave us something to launch to. And it was a new creative challenge as well. And it gave our community the reassurance that we weren't going to go dark on them. So I think, when you talk about your connection to your donors and just keeping the community apprised of what's happening is so important. So I also really admire the way, and I'd love for you to share a bit about this with our attendees, how you got really curious, back to that emotional scientist piece, about all the people that worked for you, and they were in particular roles, they had been hired, but you realized they might have other skills that if they weren't giving tours, they might have another skill that could be utilized for the things you were moving forward. And you did this to preserve jobs and people's livelihoods. Can you talk a little bit about your process?
So there was 4 things in terms of staff that I was very aware of. One is, first of all, how do we keep the money to pay them, which we need to shrink our budget and kind of make the case to donors that we were continuing to do good work. I had to, because I'm part of the University of Texas, had to figure out how to actually be able to pay them. I can't just have them fill out 8 hours a day if they're not working 8 hours a day. So what are they going to do if they're supposed to be a guard in a gallery and there's no gallery to be guarding in that moment? The other part of it was, again, that level that we're actually contributing to something together. And I feel like that sense of teamwork, like I'm always very cautious of how, anxiety can build depression and confusion, and we're all going through this horrible moment together. How do you feel like we're still building something? Like, what are we building, right? It's different than having visitors come and look at work of art, but there's still a purpose to this museum. And then again, fourth, it's like we need to show value to our community. And so, and everybody has so many skills. There's people who have jobs that are visitor services, and their job is to be a great host when people arrive to the museum. If they're not arriving to the museum, we went through this survey for all staff of skill sets that were based on the group of tasks that we found in the museum, everything from some things that were sitting on the back burner that were really important for us to get done, and we just were maxed out and we're not getting it done. Things like making our website accessible for visually impaired. We coded all the images. I think there's like 4,000 of them on our website. We transcribed all our YouTube videos, our collection database, and there was a tremendous amount of research. You can imagine that you can put a lot more information in about artists, and it's a lot of work. And when you're maxed out, you don't always have a chance to get all that done. The other part of it is we weren't very digitally savvy. We were behind, which is something I think we're all learning in this moment about who is and who isn't. And very quickly realized, okay, the only way we can communicate with our donors and our members and our visitors is through social media and videos and tours. And so quickly transitioned all of the museum to work on some of that research, accessibility through the website, or new content. And it was basically like starting a whole new museum really quickly and figuring out who could do what and reassigning.
Wow. It's such an undertaking. And I realized too that all of this mobilization of your team and new roles, you didn't even have the benefit of meeting face to face with your team as you're accustomed to. So much about what Mark Brackett's book, Permission to Feel, is about reading cues, body language, facial expressions. It's a lot harder in Zoom calls to have that connection to your people, how they're feeling. Are they motivated? Do they need encouragement? Can you share a little bit about your technique in these Zoom meetings to try to at least capture some of that emotional check-in?
So, it was really interesting because there's always a plus to, kind of a benefit in each moment that you don't expect. And I think the one perk that I've seen in these Zoom meetings is we have an all staff meeting regardless every month. It's something that is very important to me. I don't ever want to drop them because it's the time where I share what we're doing, where the institution is going, so everybody understands what we're working towards together and get a chance for other people to report. Those meetings were important to continue, so we went on Zoom. The perk of Zoom was that I had everybody, typically in a meeting, like people kind of group together in their groups and then they go sit in the same place, and there's a group in the back and then there's a more confident group perhaps in the front, and who speaks up and who doesn't. And it was kind of neutralized, and everybody is equal on Zoom is one of the interesting things. The other thing is I could see each person in their place, in their state, in their home. And so what I started to do, I think, honestly, instinctually, not really on purpose, but I was hearing from my colleagues how helpful it was, is to call on people. So, it's kind of multi-screen because it's a group of staff, 70 staff members. And I would kind of notice who was looking sad or who was sitting there, perky, ready to say something, kind of, share something. I could see people's responses. And I was, at the beginning, purposefully calling on people and saying hello, which is something I honestly, we get in our room and everybody sits in the same place. I was not in the habit of doing. And it allowed me, and maybe I was trying to do it even more so to checking in to make sure people were okay. And also allowed a place for people to speak up. And one day I just allowed everybody to kind of express how they were feeling, and just, for about 30 minutes, I said nothing, and I let people speak, which I know other leaders, other organizations have done that. And it's been very powerful, but checking in on your team, it's just a whole new training when you're trying to do it, sending a message out by email that you're trusting you're saying the right thing and it's going to be read correctly. And it's tough. And I think part of it is just thinking, if I was reading this or seeing this, does it comfort me? Does it confuse me? Is it clear? And most important for me is, am I being clear through this?
Exactly. Okay, so I want to talk about silver linings, not to minimize the damage of COVID, but in chatting with you, you talked about how your team was always so maxed out with tours, which is a great, problem to have. And I can relate to that feeling of like the treadmill running so fast that you don't really have a lot of time for reflection or to look at some of those, projects that just seem like they never get prioritized. And I love about how this has enabled your educational component of your work to possibly be reaching a global audience. Can you tell us, it's just such a happy byproduct of something that you didn't intend, but can you share a little bit about what's happening on that front?
Yeah, so, going back to the point of like the educational mission of the museum. So there's the creation of new scholarship and the exhibitions we put together, which has given our curators time to think about that work. But where it's been really challenging is, we have a very we have a commitment and a very large program dedicated to school children and university students teaching. So, integrating into their classrooms. And mostly, of course, we want them in front of the works of art. And it's not necessarily an art history lesson. It may connect to whatever lessons they're going through in a university or kind of big focus for the school districts, like social emotional learning, for example. And what do you do if you can't have a group of students all gathered around a work of art? Like that huge part of our mission that to me is essential, it can't function. And so one of the beautiful things about this is we have been committed to our programs to our local community, because those are the children that come into the museum. And we're taking all of our programming digital to digital format and creating new tools over the summer. And the silver lining is it's changed our idea of who our audience is. And, ideally those classes can still come in and look at the work of art because they support the experience. It's the experience we want the students to have. But, the great work the team has done around social justice and social emotional learning and math and reading is something that we now can share on a national platform. And so the silver lining is, this has helped us rethink. I think, for you, Kat, you've done an extraordinary job taking this, digital, and you're reaching people you may not have expected to reach. And it's made us rethink what we're doing. We still want to get in the gallery. We still want those students to come and look at a work of art, and our visitors as well. But this will add to that, and we will have that whole toolbox that will live alongside that experience in the gallery when we can, be back together in groups.
Yeah, I love that, especially given what we heard Ann Lunis's remarks this morning about the importance of creativity in times where people can feel stalled, self-expression, just enjoying the arts. The idea that you're making that available to, so many more people is such a beautiful byproduct that you didn't see coming. Well, I want to end with, another part of Mark Brackett's messaging was about self-regulation and identifying your own feelings and caring for your own emotional self. And I was so aware in our conversation, you had been planning to get married. Your wedding was a COVID casualty. You can address that in a sec. But I also, I was aware in hearing about everything you've gone through with your teams and all the adaptation and adaptability. How have you cared for yourself? Like, how do you manage your stress, your uncertainty? Tell us about that.
Well, you're right. I'm supposed to be on a honeymoon right now, but I'm happy to be talking to you and 3% conferences. Our wedding was supposed to be this past Saturday, just 3 days ago. Like much of the world, it just couldn't, just is on pause. And, this has affected us in so many different ways. And I will say that, the wedding aside, it's not that big a deal. Like, I have a wonderful man and we're committed to each other and we'll find a moment to get married. But the bigger stress really has been work, and it's been extraordinarily stressful worrying about people. And I think, if you really want to be open and care about your team, that brings a lot of, burden and responsibility that you're taking in, right? You're feeling, and you're trying to, remove anxiety and provide clarity, make sure the place doesn't fall apart, make sure you can pay everybody and try your best. And if you're doing it in a very sincere way, it's very taxing. And it has been taxing on me. And there's times where I've just had to say, a day where I was just like, I couldn't think straight. Like, guys, I need to go away for 24 hours. Everything's fine. I just need to log off. And I never encouraged my team to do that at times. I've encouraged everybody to take vacations, which is just confusing. I mean, in this moment when you're stuck at home, if that vacation means sitting out in the backyard and doing something you love, which for me is one of the things I love is cooking, and one of the other things I love is gardening. So that's been my vacation. My normal vacation is to travel. I'm a huge fan of seeing cultures in the world and places. And so with that gone, I think I've just dug into looking at the world through different food, and my plants in the garden have become my world. And I've noticed them, I think, more clearly and more beautifully, their kind of variety and what they do. The perk that I'm sitting at home watching the flowers bloom every day. Normally they're sitting at home all day long by themselves. And so it is important, and I haven't quite figured it out perfectly. And I think that's probably one of the biggest struggles for us all, is how to self-care through this. So.
Yeah, I love that visual of your flowers being kind of loved on. And actually, I had a thought of all those paintings in the empty museum not getting loved on and looked at. And I don't know if there's a comparable thing that happens to inanimate objects, but I love the idea of your garden flourishing. And I think, you're also modeling for your team self-care when you share with them that you're taking time off, or you share with them photos of your garden. My team knows that I play tennis every Wednesday morning, and that I play tennis quite a lot, but that's my salvation. That's my stress release. And I don't mind showing up to a Zoom call sometimes still like in my tennis visor or whatever, because I'm telling them in a way, chase the things you love, make time for things that give you joy. So Simone, I'm so in awe of how you have managed such a challenging year. And I have not visited your museum yet, but I really look forward to whenever, who knows when, but when it is time for your museum to open its doors, I really look forward to coming and meeting in person and touring. And congratulations to your team for seeing through this difficult time. And for when your wedding happens, I wish you well.
Thank you, Kat. And if I may just say, you're extraordinary for starting 3% movement. It's such an important cause, and my hat's off to you.
Oh, thank you for that. All right. Have a lovely day. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.